Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session today. We're really excited to share some information on building confidence in your month-end close. My colleague Ben, who I'll give a more proper introduction to in a moment, has some exciting examples to show with you. So let's get started. And before we jump into content, a few housekeeping items. If you have some questions, please put them in the question panel, which is over on the right below polls. You'll see a little block for questions. Just type those in. I can't promise we'll answer every question on the session, but I will commit that we'll get to everybody with an answer, if not today. And there will be a survey at the end. I ask you to take a moment and answer a few questions. Helps us to make this better. So let's go ahead and get started. If you can see my screen, hopefully you can. I'm going to do a quick intro and then ask Ben to go through the content. So for our agenda, brief intro into who we are, who's Preferred Strategies, and what we do. I always say we're kind of a niche within a niche, very laser focused on analytics and business intelligence. We'll certainly get into the financial close and data challenges that presents. And then Ben will take over with a live demonstration showing various tools using our QuickLaunch model, Excel, paginated reports, SSRS, and Power BI. And then we'll address any questions at the end. So this is a slide I like to use to illustrate what we call the reporting house of cards, and I like to call kind of reporting of the past, or for many companies, still the current. So you've got Vista, your ERP, you've got Salesforce. Now I have those two listed specifically because we have pre-built models for Salesforce and Viewpoint Vista, which is our focus today. But think about other data, project management, estimating, broaden that scope, Internet of Things, weather data, data coming in from equipment sensors, anything that we can collect that's pertinent to our operations can be worked with. But what we see today is people build custom reports, a popular tool in the Viewpoint world, Crystal and SSRS both. So we build these reports, 1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 20, and then we want to leverage Excel, of course. It's a great tool for what if scenarios. So we build a spreadsheet, maybe extracting data, importing, exporting data, and that becomes 10 or more. And now people are starting to dabble. I heard that from a client the other day, dabbling with Power BI, so I'm using that, but dabble with Power BI. And what that looks like is they're taking data from their Excel spreadsheets and then leveraging it for visualizations in Power BI. It's a nice advancement, but as you build these out, you end up with really a reporting anarchy and governance nightmare. The way I like to put it is, if you think about each spreadsheet, each Power BI, or certainly each Crystal report, each one is kind of a silo you need to manage. If you want to make edits, you got to open up each one, make your changes or updates, validate it, propagate it out to the menu. Now, we realize there is no easy button. We still look, we have not found that. However, what we do deliver is a very specific, well-governed data model, kind of illustrated by the magic blue cube. Think of it as your information engine. We like to call it the holy grail for reporting. So now all of your Viewpoint data, pertinent data, and any other data source, like I mentioned before, Salesforce, CRM, estimating, what have you, that's pertinent to operations, that data is now coming in and being transformed into reporting-friendly information in the magic blue cube here, or QuickLaunch, and we call it that for a reason. You implement QuickLaunch and you're up in a few weeks. We try and create these things on your own. It's a much longer time frame, so time to value. But my point is, now I've got one library of data that I'm managing, keeping up to date, securing, so much better data governance. And if I want to make a change, I make the change in one place, validate it in one place, but now it's going to automatically propagate to any and all of the reporting tools calling that. Excel, Power BI. So this is visually kind of illustrating what the value is that we deliver. And then by way of introduction, our team just now 20 years, we've been in business, 27 people really with a well-aligned mission. All of us are focused on business intelligence, data analytics, 2 ERPs, JD Edwards where we started, now Viewpoint Vista, and then we have the model for Salesforce. So we're very specific in what we do. This is a good opportunity for me to give a more proper introduction to my colleague, our VP of Product Management, Mr. Ben Harrison. Ben, why don't you talk about your background a bit, if you would?
Well, thanks, Frank. Yeah, so again, I'm Ben Harrison. I have a long history in construction analytics. I worked for a construction company for 18 years, originally using JD Edwards and creating reports in that platform. We migrated into Vista, so got to be familiar with that platform as well, and have written dozens of reports, and really got kind of connected to preferred strategies originally back in my JD Edwards Crystal days, and then brought preferred strategies into the Vista world when the company I worked for moved there. So again, long history in analytics and construction.
Thank you, Ben. And our founder, right here, pictured on the left, Adam Krieger, came out of Granite Rock Finance 20 years ago and started the company initially around reporting for JD Edwards. But three boxes I like to mention that we check very well. You've got Ramon here, who worked in Viewpoint support. I spent 7 years at Viewpoint, 36 years in construction ERP. Ben was an engineer at Viewpoint. And so our team really has a high acumen in construction finance, really understands WIP and retention and the processes that we do in construction. We understand Viewpoint Vista really well in that database. And we also understand the Microsoft stack and tools like Power BI and Excel. And one side note I'd like to point out, our office is headquartered just outside of Santa Cruz. So if you ever get to, have to, want to come visit our office, there could be worse places in the country to visit. So at this juncture, Ben, I'm going to ask if you would take the screen over and show some of the examples in action.
Will do. Thank you. So hopefully I picked the right screen here when we get started. I want to go to screen 2 there. Frank, am I showing Power BI the service?
100%. Yep, got it.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm not going to start in the service. So as Frank had talked about, but I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. We started talking about this data model and why the blue cube is going to be helpful to you, particularly as you think about month-end close. How do you do that better and build confidence in your month-end close? So I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the data model and how it works. So the data model, that's illustrated by here, and I'm going to use Excel, and then I'll move into Power BI. But really, the data model is going to give you this governed set of rules and formulas that allow you to do some quick analysis. So maybe I'm looking for a quick trial balance. I can come in here and say, well, give me the account part 1 with the description. It's already defined in that way. So this is looking at the GL accounts table. Maybe I want to go and say, well, you know, if I look at GL accounts, I'm going to have to look at actuals and section to date, particularly if I'm looking for a balance sheet sort of trial balance. So that quickly, I've gotten, you know, the actual amount of section to date by account, and I can see that it sums to 0. So not too hard to start using the model. You get the idea of what's here, but quickly I'm going to want to have expanded information about that. So let me go ahead and collapse the whole view here. For instance, might want to have a calendar feature to this. So maybe I want to slice this by year period, or be able to select a year and period that matters. And so I might be able to come in and add that as a slicer. The model should allow me to quickly navigate between times, so the analysis can be spread over time and look at trending. Again, that blue cube has all that time-sensitive information in it. I also might want to actually aggregate things. So, you know, you got a balance sheet hierarchy, you've got an income statement hierarchy. So if I was going to look at the balance sheet and I said, well, I'd like to see that grouped by assets and liabilities, right? So I can start kind of quickly building some meaning into my reporting very simply, so that I can start doing that analysis. Again, analysis is where you're going to get the confidence in your month-end data. So one of the themes that you'll hear me say again and again this morning is you want to close your books soon enough so that you can do some deeper analysis to understand what changed this month, what are the trends that were important, and how do you make sure you have a handle on those and there's no surprises. That was one of the lessons I learned early on in construction reporting, is surprises are bad. So analysis helps fight against that. So in addition to that, you can obviously start even doing more fancy things. I could start maybe bringing in columns of data so that my trial balance now is by company. In all cases, I'm looking for maybe accounts that weren't categorized. I've seen this happen before, where you add a new account to your report. And if your report is defined in Excel, that new account is not necessarily going to show up. right? The fact that the data model, this blue cube, includes all data out of the general ledger means that I'm going to have, if one of these categories wasn't assigned to an asset, I'd have a blank category at the top, and I'd quickly know, oh shoot, I didn't get that set up in my system. So again, fixing mistakes, doing that type of look and feel gives me the ability to quickly fix the errors that that snuck up on me during the course of the month.
Hey, Ben, one comment that comes up a lot here is when you're pulling data in from the model, from the blue cube, it's pretty quick and responsive. Is that because you're leveraging the data transformed in the model, blue cube, or as opposed to pulling from the transaction data directly?
Yeah, so what happens with that blue cube is it's an in-memory set of data, and it's refreshed during the course of every hour or whatever the refresh rate is appropriate for your company. Obviously, during a month-end close, you probably want to have a refresh button you click because you made a change. Now you want to see what that looks like. But that model is kind of pre-calculated so that you can get that instant gratification of drilling down, seeing details, and that's an important part of analytics is the speed at which you get the answers.
Thank you. Excellent.
So while I'm in Vista, I do want to talk a little bit about some analysis tools that we're developing that I think will be helpful in building confidence. And one of those is this margin variance. And I used to do this at the construction company I worked with a lot. And this is just a simple Excel example. In this area, I might have a real simple income statement where I got revenue, cost of goods sold, gross profit, overhead with a net profit. And if I looked at prior year net profit, I'm at 50, and current year I'm at 125, and that's pretty good. That's a $75 dollar increase. What is that? What is that? How did I get $75 more dollars? Well, this is the idea of a volume and margin contribution. The way you calculate these is you say, well, I've got additional volume, $25 more dollars done at compared to 5.6% last year. So that's essentially 25 times 5.6. But I'm getting $73 out of the increased margin. So 8% better margin times my revenue delta gives me 75. But those things total. And the idea is that this 75 must match that. This 73 is that because I'm still adjusting the overhead. But this then gives me that analysis capability of if I'm doing better, or if I'm doing worse, what are the contributing factors to that? Is it revenue? Is it margin? Is it both? And that's the idea of this volume margin contribution. So the good news is we're building that into our reports. So if I go and look at maybe a Power BI report, and I've got revenue contribution and margin contribution, now I can start looking at that across companies, across time, and really get some more insight into if I'm doing better or worse, exactly why. Again, the theory behind this is analytics helps you build confidence in your month-end close because you can understand where the numbers are coming from. If I have it in a model like this and using Power BI, I can easily start saying, well, just show me the Viewpoint construction company. What was that margin revenue contribution? Maybe I want to look at heavy highway. So again, the beauty of Power BI is it makes this sort of slicing, dicing analytics very, very useful. And that again, the mantra we want to say is you got a blue cube model. If you have that, then start using the tools, the right tool for the job to kind of dig into that analytics process.
Ben, there's a lot of, sorry to interrupt. A lot of people playing with Power BI. I see them doing visuals. They really like the tool. It's why it's clearly a leader in the BI space. But would you say it's having the data? I see the model on the right open. The data transformed like that. Is that the foundation that makes this tool much more powerful for everything that you're doing?
It really does. Again, this when we're in Excel, you notice there was a GL balances with the actual amount and inception to date. So these are the exact same. The cube is one thing. It's one version of the truth. So if I'm hitting that cube using Excel or Power BI or paginated reports, it is one version of the truth. So there's no discrepancies. If you run a report and if I run a report, we always get the same answer, right? So that helps again build confidence, right? That your analysis and my analysis are all looking at the same numbers, and we should be able to then agree at the end that we got the answers correct.
Thank you, Ben.
So beyond taking then just a number, margin contribution for a month, another important part of that is trends. I always think that analytics is about looking for outliers, looking for trends, looking for correlations. So maybe I want to take that margin analysis and plot the revenue and contribution margin over time. Again, my sample data is pretty pitiful, so don't. This is meant to be illustrative than actually factual, because there's not real companies with real job profit data. But the idea is that I can actually see over time that my margin contribution had a real peak during this part of the year, and my revenue contribution has been slowly coming up, but now my margins are fading. So this is good insight into understanding what's next, because really the future is often predicted by the recent past, at least. So seeing this over time is important. Taking that same concept to another type of measure is, a lot of people want to look at KPIs, and we'll talk about the CFMA benchmarking KPIs here in a minute. But if I was one of the important KPIs most companies want to look at is the current ratio, which is the ratio of liabilities, assets divided by liabilities. Now, this number is nonsense. Again, my sample data is really awful. A current ratio probably should run in the 2%. It's really a measure of how liquid you are in terms of ability to pay for issues as you go forward. A company that has 16%, a ratio of 16 has way too much cash. But so that's not the issue. The issue is that having that number and knowing what it is the first step. Measuring that is great. Knowing what it has been and what it changed is really where the insight comes in. So you want to be able to start plotting that over time. And in this case, you can see my prior years, this dark blue line at the bottom. And it looks like I had 3 times last year where it really jumped up. And you might wonder why. Well, I'm not only plotting the ratio, but I'm plotting the numerator and the denominator. So I can see that last year, my current assets had a significant increase 3 times. Primarily what was driving those, right? My liabilities were not. This year, though, the light blue line at top, I've had a drop in my KPI, right? It's reduced, and I can actually see it's largely due to a big increase in liabilities. So again, my point is that analytics is more than just having a KPI. It's understanding the changes in that KPI over time, and what were the big contributing factors to that. So with KPIs, it's not just that companies need to worry about current ratio. There's lots of things to be interested in. So CFMA, if you're not a member of CFMA, I would highly recommend it. It's really useful. This is kind of a standard set of financial ratios that they recommend construction companies are concerned about. I got to tell you that not every construction company needs to worry about every one of these. Maybe there's not some inventory issues for you, but these should be some of the things that you particularly care about. I cared a lot about backlog when I did analytics for the company I worked for. Really understanding the amount of backlog we had and the quality of that backlog. Is it high margin work? Is it fading? Is the work that we got last year have more likelihood of profit fade than the work we got this year? And so understanding backlog was really important, and these ratios were important. So we're going to be building into our model, our general ledger model, that blue cube, these ratios that can be configured for our customers or our prospects that should help kind of give that idea over time about how am I doing. We just looked at the example of the current ratio just now. Once you have these ratios, there's actually something else you can get from CFMA that might be helpful. And this is how do you compare to other companies your size, right? So this just, again, the same ratios, it just gives you industry-wide kind of how do you think you stand up to what is kind of average for the industry. And I think a lot of people get meaning out of understanding, are they doing better or worse? Where should they be focusing their improvement processes? So more coming there on ratios. I think it's pretty exciting stuff.
Ben, I really like the insights derived from trends over time is pretty powerful. So great job illustrating that. And for those of you that aren't members of CFMA, this financial benchmarker they publish once a year that you can purchase. And so our goal is to deliver the KPIs to you so you can compare that to your peers of similar size, as Ben mentioned. So great job on that, Ben. Thank you.
So another big element for me when I was worried about month-end close at the company I worked for was the WIP report, right? And just so you know, what we did with our WIP report is we had about 40 pages, narrow space, 11 by 17 paper. And so I'd go through that WIP report looking for problems with it. So by the time you get to the 38th page, analyzing the numbers, it gets pretty hard. So the idea that I'm promoting here is bring that WIP report into a tool like Power BI. The reason you can do that, or the reason you want to do that, is you want to start being able to say, well, you know, backlog. If I start clicking on this column, I'm just really sorting my whole report by the column. And I can say, well, you know, why do I have negative backlog? I should never have negative backlog. Backlog is, you know, essentially projected revenue or contract amount minus earned revenue. Have I over-earned? Am I, you know, what's the deal there? So finding errors is really quick. Another error that I always look for on all those pages and pages of data is percent complete. So if I look at every job here that's more than 100% complete, I guarantee you there's something wrong with the WIP. We need to look into that and understand what's happening. Honestly, we'll talk about next. You know, sometimes that was due to an AP posting that after the month closed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But again, what I'm suggesting is that as you're analyzing your CIE/BIE, you know, the cost in excess, bills in excess, or you're analyzing what earned revenue you had this month or this year or the, you know, job to date, what were those changes? Being able to quickly prioritize and sort this data is going to be really useful and giving you confidence in your analysis process. Again, the analysis being an important part of the month-end close.
And Ben, one additional, if I could just interject, sorry, really quick. That's a great point you make by sorting by percent complete. Over 100 is an issue. The additional power when you have your data, you know, transformed like this is using the notification part of Power BI. I could have the system tell me, right, if that percent has gone over 100%, rather than me having to find it.
Absolutely. You can easily set up notifications, and that's very powerful. The other thing that to emphasize again is, you know, we're using things, earned revenue, cost in excess, bills in excess, backlog. These are numbers that don't exist natively within Vista system, but they are things that are consistent, right? So that blue cube, again, that one version of the truth, defines backlog once and for all, defines cost in excess, bills in excess, so that I don't need to make sure I'm updating individual reports when we make changes to our business process, because the model itself is taking care of that. There's going to be plenty of times when I look at a WIP report and I see I'm over 100% done, and I want to know what's going on, where I'm going to want to drill through to the details, right? So 1.6 million billing, and I go look at the job details. Here I got the 1.76 million. This is where that details matters in that blue cube, because you don't want to have to go look at an error here and then go run another report to say what happened. The answer you want should be right here. And again, building confidence in your month-end close is our subject, and getting the details of the numbers you're seeing is really important part of understanding or building that confidence. So another thing that happened to me all the time back when I worked for that construction company was month-end close with accounts payable. It was really a pet peeve for me. And what we would do is we'd be running our WIP report. We'd say our actual cost is done. We'd say we're 98% finished. And then somebody in AP would find an invoice. They'd reopen the month that we thought was closed, post that invoice, and now I am 102% done, right? So I checked the report already, and then it changed right before my very eyes. Very frustrating, and trying to narrow that down. So one of the things that we did, which I think is really helpful, is we started tracking unapproved invoices. And so if AP found an invoice and then we'd known it was unapproved, we could still book that on the balance sheet. I could still show it as a liability, but I don't have to charge it to each that job. I don't have to change my WIP report, but I can make the company balance sheet correct and still keep my analytics moving forward without having to start over again. So one of the things I would recommend, if you're not using AP unapproved invoices, that you want to start doing that, because that, if you just say, okay, I've got a bunch of invoices, how many of them are unapproved, and financially do I need to account for that risk or that cost, even though I don't know which job it goes to? I can actually have both things, right? I can control that. So looking at that is important. Another thing we would do as on the AR side, and I won't go to that report, but same idea. I've got a maybe an old balance that's 5 months old, and I should have that as part of my month-end close process to say, is there some risk in my accounts receivable that I need to record now? And then I don't need to be explaining to auditors later on about why eventually I didn't get paid. If I can manage that from a visibility point during the month-end close process. So hopefully this is making a bit of sense about how the analytics part and understanding the whole of your system between general ledger, job cost, WIP, and AR and AP are all part of that process of closing months. And you really need them all to work together to increase the confidence that all the details are done. And there's, as you probably closed months before, there's a lot going on in month-end close. So it's really important to have that process defined. One more or two more things I want to talk about in terms of really helping with that close process. I'm going to go back to my job cost report. So I'll go to home and pull that job cost report. And that's in the analytics world, starting to use the machine learning and the analytics that come with a tool like Power BI. So you got that one version of the truth. Now you have the opportunity to extend your analytics beyond what you thought was possible before. So this is an example of a narrative visual. None of these words were typed by me. This really resonates with me because I used to have to write a monthly summary with kind of saying what was our procurement, what was our, what did we bid, what did we win, give this summary of what was the quality of that work. And I had to type it out by hand. And I'd go read through the reports and I'd pick highlights out and I would then type it, right? So it's prone to errors, prone to mistakes. I might have missed something that was important. But in this case, I'm using that blue cube and I'm using a particular visual, this visual here, and I can actually configure that to say certain things, right? So excuse me about that. It's my screen's acting weird. But so you can start saying, okay, I need it to be a discrete description. It needs to be a bulleted list. It needs to be very verbose. I can change the verbosity so it's medium or longer. But again, now a machine is going through and looking for all the driving factors. What changed? What were the highlights? What were the big ticket elements? Now I can read it, I can edit it, I can make changes to it. But again, using computers to do some of this searching and slicing is really a big help in that analytics process. Another thing that I think is pretty compelling, I'm going to go back to the general ledger report to kind of illustrate this, is the idea that I can have it analyze changes for me. So I'm looking at, in my general ledger report, expenses over time, and it's pretty consistent here. That might be fine. I'm using year to date, but I can actually say, right click and go and say analyze and show me where this is different than the month before, right? So what if I had a big change between 2 months or a big variance? And it can go and say, well, the minor category order is really probably not what I'm interested in. I might ignore that. But the actual minor category cost might be important. I can see that office costs have been really significant in these changes. Indirect salaries, probably less so, right? So again, so much less contribution, much more contribution. I'm getting these insights, and I didn't ask it to look for that. It just went and looked at all the changes on all the categories, and it's come back with some insights into what is driving that. Again, maybe I'm looking in at office costs. Might be looking at account parts, right? Part 1 and part 2. Now, probably I'd want to have descriptions here, but the idea that you can use these artificial intelligence, machine learning tools to give you confidence in your month end close. And it's really much more helpful if you have that governed data set for the machine algorithms to kind of sort through.
And Ben, just to confirm, the little like, dislike, thumbs up, thumbs down, is that meant to drive the AI or the machine learning to more accurate content, right? Is that?
So what it does is it gives Microsoft some feedback as to which of their algorithms are returning better results. Now they will then in turn build that back into their machine learning algorithm. But so it's really intended to say this one really worked well, because they're tweaking those every month. Microsoft releases revisions to their Power BI service, and that comes with improvements developed through feedback from people who say, yeah, this was a good insight. So it does drive to improvements to say yes or no, like it. And then there are other places where if you like a particular visual, you can pin it to a dashboard and keep it. This particular right click doesn't do that, but there's all sorts of neat things. And that, again, back to our topic at hand, you're trying to figure out how confident I am about my month end close, and how can you go look at the changes and the variances to get a good handle on, yeah, that makes sense, that did happen, this is why this is different this month. And that's always the questions is why. Why is that? That why is at the detail level, and it's also at the comparison between changes at the detail level. Questions so far?
Yeah, we do have a few questions when you're ready to move to them, but a quick comment. I mean, I think it's important to share the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And one of the more powerful customer quotes I remember not too long ago was, our financial close process went from days to hours. And it was really predicated on having this reporting platform and the Blue Cube info engine QuickLaunch set up. So it's exciting to see that kind of improvement being made by taking on this endeavor. So
well, thanks, Frank. Actually, that actually gets a really good to my conclusion. Then we can go to questions and go back to anything. But that month end close, I've always had, every CFO I've ever worked for says I want to close the month earlier, and that's an admirable goal. Shareholders want to know, banks want to know. Being able to close month early is really admirable, but closing it without an analysis is not good for you, right? So the point of closing early is not that you just close the books, that maybe you can spend more time now understanding and analyzing it. So again, my conclusion for today would be automate as many processes as possible. I can use spreadsheets to create a quick trial balance because I have that governed blue cube. When I do all that work and formulas in the spreadsheet, I'm going to have errors, right? So the automating the processes includes, so here's an example. I used to run a report that had my backlog in it. I would retype that in an email and send that to finance. Finance would rekey that into a journal entry so it could show up on reports. There's, 3 steps of failure in that. So automating that's a big deal. It saves me time, it saves finance time, and it eliminates the potential for errors, right? So every manual process, every manual spreadsheet, if it's you keying in data or creating a formula in the spreadsheet, is prone to mistakes and is not going to build confidence in your data. Oops, shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. Close the books earlier, spend more time early. I'm a fan of closing the books earlier. That's why I would suggest, close your AP and don't open it again, because that just ruins your analytics time. If you find an invoice that has to be recorded, accrue that on the balance sheet, and it's a liability, it's correct. I think that's a very good process to have. Use the right tools. I mentioned, Excel for quick trial balance is really, really good. Power BI for analysis over time, the trends, the drill down to the details. So figure out the tools you're using to do that analysis and understand why the changes happened in that time. That's going to be really helpful to you. And the other thing that I do believe in is checklists. I live by checklists. Your month end close should follow a very consistent process. You should know exactly what happens. More than one person should know that. One of the things about spreadsheets is often they're built by a single person. If they're gone, nobody else knows how to do that. So create a checklist, make sure the process is documented, and follow it faithfully, and that will help build that confidence in your data.
If I had one comment, sorry, on the spreadsheet, I'll just mention it quickly, because again, I love when customers give us feedback. And the comment was Excel, right tool, potentially, but if not used properly, and the example it gave me is, you know, we export data, someone makes manual updates, they email it to somebody else, they do their updates. In that process, they're kind of getting further and further from the source of truth, in a sense. And that was a really good comment, I thought. So didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, that certainly was my experience. Is Excel. You know, I built some doozies of Excel spreadsheets, and I was really proud of them. But no one else understood how that worked. So it was me. If I wasn't there, no one could use that spreadsheet. So if you can get those types of processes into a model, and again, that blue cube, it can have anything in it. That idea of revenue contribution or something else you need added because it's something you need at your company, put that in the blue cube, and then read that data in Excel, but don't put the logic in Excel. It's just too prone to breaking.
Yep. Are you ready to move to questions, or do you have any other content?
No, I'm ready. If there are any questions, let's take them.
I do. Good one, I think, because this one we've all experienced, either implementing or directly using. How WIP reports can change over time. It's like trying to shoot a moving target when you really could use a snapshot almost. How do we address that, or how can we improve that?
And that is a very complicated issue, and I've seen it done well and seen it done poorly, because they can change in time. And you know, Vista, I like Vista as a database, as a system, but it has some inherent problems with creating a frozen snapshot in time of what was my current contract value, right? That's driven in reporting by the start month on the contract master. If someone changes that on accident, all of a sudden your projected final revenue and a WIP report for a closed month is going to change, because there's nothing that stops you from doing that. So one of the best ways I would recommend, or easiest ways, is, again, make sure you have a process that looks for that. Has someone changed key data that's going to drive your WIP? So that's kind of low-hanging fruit. Fix those rules and then check to make sure they happen. That's part of that checklist process. Yep. Another thing that's a little bit more complicated is to create a snapshot. Now, the snapshot itself will freeze, take a picture of all that data in time, keep it in a database so that you can report off that. The snapshot itself is what we used to do at the company I work for. But it introduces its own complexities of when did you take the snapshot? You know, what happens if you took the snapshot too early, and now you might have to update that, right? So it's snapshots are a really good solution, but it also has discipline that you have to put into it. So if you're not disciplined, you're going to find that that's not good. So the simple way is build a process and stick to it. More complicated and probably more robust is to build a snapshot. We've built a snapshot before. Before we would implement it somewhere, I want to make sure that the company we're talking to really understands the pros and cons of that.
Good point, Ben. Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Next question, we have two more. And this one we get a lot, because you're doing this and the data is so responsive. We mentioned it earlier. How often is the data refreshed, and how come it appears to be so quick?
Yeah, so that's back to that idea that that blue cube is sitting in memory, and you want it to be in memory so that people doing a drill down, people using the tool, either Excel or Power BI, don't want to wait while the little hourglass spins for 45 seconds or 2 minutes, right? And some of those processes are very complicated. So the blue cube gives you instant gratification in terms of answers, but it's a copy of the data. It's a refresh, but you can refresh that incrementally. So I don't have to refresh the whole blue cube. I can refresh the GL table and not the job cost table, or I can refresh the AP table but not the AR table. And so part of the implementation process of that blue cube is understand how often do you want to refresh it. And almost always our customers want the GL to not only refresh automatically, let's say twice a day or 4 times a day, but also have an on-demand capability, like refresh now. And so it can be, you can refresh it now as often as you want. You can do it dozens of times a day. But it is a decision to be made about how often you refresh that data.
And Ben, is it also accurate to say because of that technology and how we've set it up, it's not impacting the performance of the transactional database?
That's the beauty of it. That if we set it up the way we propose to do it, then you're never refreshing the cube and driving your payroll system down, right, or your GL system, because you're copying that data elsewhere.
Excellent. Last question. I love this one. Is the model got to transform the data, I'll say, into a format that's easy enough to allow ad hoc or my own self-reporting if needed?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big keys to becoming data-driven as a company, is that traditionally, report requests went to IT, and IT built this beautiful report, delivered it back. Like my cat used to deliver dead lizards to my door. I would never want that dead lizard. And that's how a lot of the IT reports are too. Like, wait, that's not what I asked for. So getting that into the hands of a project engineer who's wants to ask questions and refine that query, the model allows that. You don't have to be a reporting expert. You don't have to understand SQL or Crystal reports, but you can still drag and drop and create reports. Now, it's also true, there's many people in the company will never do that, and you don't want them to. But certainly, if you currently have one person creating reports for your company, the blue cube allows 5 people to create reports, and that's good. That's part of becoming data-driven.
Excellent, Ben. I really appreciate the answers. That is all the questions. So I want to wrap up by saying, first, thank you for being here with us today. The slides and the recording from this will be available. If you'd like it, just reach out to us. And bottom line, Ben, great team member. We have 26 others. Reach out to any of us if you have questions. We'd love to help. Also, there'll be a quick survey at the end, also emailed to you. If you get a chance to just quickly fill it out, it helps us to get better. So thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ben. Take care.